also Rachel, so easy to remember when we get into questions. And I work for Sonoma Clean Power, which is the CCA up in Sonoma and Mendocino counties. I love, as I get to present this more and more, coming to audiences where I actually don't really have to explain what a CCA is. So that is really exciting progress on my front, because being the second CCA, we would always go into rooms and they'd be like, what? How does that make sense? Are you a municipal utility? So we are a generation-only utility. So your questions about what this looks like as we start to clean up our utility grid, I'll show you in just a second. We're a bit different from your normal utility in that really number one in our mandate, our Joint Powers Authority that established the Sonoma Clean Power, said that our mission was to reduce greenhouse gas emissions for Sonoma and Mendocino counties, which is a very strange mission for your friendly neighborhood utility. But this means we really early on got into things like running electric vehicle programs, thinking about things like decarbonization, and thinking about how we engage our customers in these programs. We serve about 600,000 customers total, just to give you a picture. And PG&E obviously is our partner utility with poles and wires to get that to our customers. What's unique about a CCA is we are able to run our own programs, and we are able to operate outside the confines of the CPUC three-prong test. So we can do really neat things around electrification. And our general philosophy on programs at Sonoma Clean Power is that we should be creating programs that fill gaps that are things PG&E and other utilities can't do as easily or maybe aren't as cost effective. I wanted to start by just showing why we're doing this and what this looks like for a utility. So starting first with the power sources that we use and what this looks like, and then the impact of this on buildings. So Sonoma Clean Power, we actually just got our 2017 and 18 numbers verified, and PG&E's as well, but we trend about half of the emissions in our power sources that PG&E does. And that's actually saying something phenomenal, because PG&E is a very clean utility when you sort of zoom out and look at the wider US. This is pretty standard for a CCA. Because we're newer, generation prices are much lower, so we do invest in really clean resources. And I'll show you what that looks like in a bit. The impact of this on the building sector, and this is a very funky chart, but what you want to sort of pay attention to here is the last 2 points here, which are 2010 and 2015. So Sonoma Clean Power started serving customers in 2014. And you can see the direct impact on the building energy sector of just reducing emissions on the utility side of things. So you can see that little portion, the green portion of the pie, shrink as we start to serve our customers. What is remaining in that big chunk are sort of two things. Some remaining electrical use that can be tackled with things like energy efficiency, but the majority of that is honestly natural gas. So as we started to ramp up, this was a really natural place for us to start to engage in the building sector. Looking at our power sources, yeah, go ahead. You want me to go back?
Why was there such a huge upswing? Is that on-road transportation?
It is. There is an upswing in on-road transportation locally for us, just more people. Between that 2010 and 2015 number. But the chart overall emissions are trending down. On-road transportation is a bigger portion of the pie, but it is going up. And the building sector did sort of make that huge jump down. What's interesting is we don't see that building sector trend continuing into the next emission cycle. So this really was directly because of Sonoma Clean Power coming in. What this looks like from our power source side of things is pretty interesting. So your question about would a utility invest in natural gas, really the answer is no. So this is what in 2014 a utility starting up would invest in. We're pretty similar actually to a lot of the CCAs, other than our geothermal, which is a local product. That's pretty unique to us. What is our biggest pain point as a utility is this, does this actually have a pointer? Sort of. This thing right here that says KISO system power, 13%. So that's basically the delta between our contracts and what we need to serve our customers. That delta occurs exclusively in the 5 to 8 p.m. window. Go figure. Yeah. So they don't really, what's really interesting is we've come to this point as a utility where we can't procure a solution. So there's no really great renewable resources that only operate from 5 to 8 p.m. Otherwise, we would just buy our way into this solution. What this comes down to is our solution is a combination of strategic electrification and load shifting with our customers. And we really think our customers can be a solution here.
Is there a huge price difference?
There are huge price differences between all of these.
Like magnitudes higher?
It depends. So generally, anything that can produce at 5 to 8 p.m., you're paying a premium for. So like our geothermal, which is a baseload resource consistently producing, really expensive for us. Hydro is a bit cheaper, but generally pricing is sort of variable depending on demand. It also depends on just supply and demand. So most of these, the KISO system power, we're buying on an as-needed basis. So if everyone else is looking to buy on a really hot day at 8 p.m., the pricing is going to go really, really high. If I had to buy something, say, at 2 p.m. During summer, then I could be getting that. Actually, people will sell that to us because we have too much solar on the grid. A couple questions?
So what is the source of the KISO system power? Is it carbon loaded or?
It is, who knows? So that's really our only GHG impact is from that system power. When you buy it, it's a little bit of a mystery, mainly natural gas. It's resources that can basically ramp at 5 to 8 p.m., which generally means natural gas. So that's how we solve that problem right now in California, unfortunately.
Are these wind and hydro purchases, are they all in-state or those out-of-state?
So the wind is all in-state. The solar is mostly in-state. The hydro is all out-of-state. So we're actually unique in a CCA. I believe we're the only CCA that does this, but our premium product, so almost every CCA has a premium product. Ours is 100% produced within our service territory, which is a big commitment for us. It's more expensive than a typical utilities 100% renewable product, but right now it's comprised of geothermal and solar. And what's really nice about that is it's sort of self-balancing. So it has some baseload resource. It's not something that we just sort of make up the difference in our larger portfolio, and that's really important to us. Yeah.
Are you looking into battery storage? Or,
we are. That's sort of a nuanced question. So every utility, including CCAs, is required to have a portion of their load met by storage. That's currently 1%, probably scaling. Most utilities are looking to do that sort of on the utility side of the meter. We're really interested, and I'll get into this in the slides, about what that looks like as distributed resources, especially from an equity standpoint. If you as the utility buy something that generally gets rate-based and affects all customers, if we can have our customers that can afford to install batteries do so and have that benefit the wider grid, we're really excited about looking at that combination of distributed and utility-owned resources. But yes, it is top of mind right now. So, what decarbonization looks like in action. We really were gung-ho about starting up these retrofit programs, and then come the end of 2017, we had this really horrific fire that destroyed a large portion of our service territory. So that was a game changer in how we thought about decarbonization in this sector, and we honestly had a community that was just hurting. So we met with PG&E and the Bay Area Air Quality Management District and started talking about outside of sort of program confines, how do we help our community rebuild? How do we really start talking to them about decarbonization and things that make sense? And thankfully, our partners were really gung-ho about jumping into this program with us. It's called Advanced Energy Rebuild, and I am really happy to say this really strange program and collaboration between these three entities that have really never worked together before is now being replicated across the state in other fire districts. The model is really an electrification program for new construction. So how it works is we have 3 incentive levels. The base incentive is $7,500, and that's sort of our introduction to the program. That's for homes that are dual fuel, so have either natural gas or propane. We do require some really funky things for a utility program. So we require that all appliances get pre-wired for an eventual switch to electrification. Really easy to do in new construction. The estimates are about $200. So why not do it then instead of paying the $16,000 that you would have to pay in a retrofit scenario. We also require all of these are prepped for solar. So actually running conduit for that, as well as have an installed EV charging station. And that's our minimum entry. We offer $5,000 more, so $12,500 if that homeowner makes the switch to an all-electric home, which we found is kind of the sweet spot for paying for that delta in a new construction scenario in Santa Rosa. Sticking points, gas, cooking, and fireplaces. So I'll talk a little bit about resources we use to help promote the switch there. But things like water heaters have been super easy. I think most people don't care what their water heater is, so long as it's there and producing hot water. And thus far we just crossed the 200 mark in terms of homes participating. This is really interesting to me as we start to talk about these REACH codes and sort of pushing people towards that all-electric route and not mandating it. So we're currently seeing about, depends on the week, but between 30 and 40% of people choose that route. We have a very strict requirement for all-electric, which is no gas meter. A large portion of these people are one gas appliance, like a fireplace. I had someone the other day tell me that Santa could do with an electric fireplace, and I was really excited about that, but seems to be a sticking point still. And then lastly, we offer, on top of either of these packages, a $5,000 incentive for folks that do solar and battery storage. It is an and I'll show you why that's really important to us as a utility in a couple slides when we talk about this. And then you can see some stats there that I won't read, but you guys will get the slides. Okay, yeah.
You're requiring all houses to have level 2 EV charging?
Correct, and we give it to people for free, so it's really, they have to plug it in, it's really hard. And why actually we give it to them for free is because then we can control that resource. So we can dispatch that electric vehicle when we have excess solar, soak that up, come 5 to 8 p.m. if their car's plugged in, we can ramp it slowly down. So it's a load that we can really take advantage of. This is what the emissions look like and why we do this. This is Santa Rosa specific, so your mileage will vary. But what's I think really interesting in this is we've been in this sort of energy efficiency mindset for so long. And you can see the first 2 items there are natural gas homes, just looking at energy efficiency. And you can see there's some reduction in emissions, but you don't really make a difference until you start to electrify that home. And this has been the one slide as we really start to talk to our local jurisdictions that has really made the case for potentially looking at something like a mandate or a REACH code to help incentivize this. You can see too, going into that, the 4th one is sort of energy efficiency in the electric case. And then the 5th one, it's getting really small, is our 100% greenhouse gas free, renewable product. and what the emissions look like there. So if we want to get as close to zero as possible, that's the way we have to go. Geothermal has a little bit of GHG emissions to it, so I get that question a lot. Why is there still emissions at that one? So, yep. Yeah, so we have some, because the CEC says so. Yeah. Yeah, so GHG emissions for various sources are very heavily regulated.
There's between the code standard electric only and the energy efficient electric only.
Yeah.
There's a really little difference, and I'm just curious about that.
Because electric appliances are so darn efficient, and to really honestly pass code, this code cycle, you have to do a pretty efficient heat pump water heater. So doing that delta in energy efficiency is pretty diminishing returns for the all electric home.
And so shell measures aren't really part of the energy efficient.
I will say, this is assuming sort of standard Santa Rosa construction. We don't have a lot of like exterior insulation right now that's being done. I will say a handful of projects are doing that, but that's not the norm. So this is assuming sort of normal construction. Obviously you can reduce that a little bit by doing really beefed up shell measures, but we're actually already starting to see like high performance attics this code cycle. So pretty diminishing returns, I think, from the envelope standpoint. And really things like water heaters, the code's already requiring pretty efficient appliances. So it's getting harder and harder to beat Title 24. Okay, the fun part. So this is our first homeowner who actually rebuilt the program. He let us come and take pictures of his house so that he can show people what an all-electric home looks like. He actually invited me over for a housewarming at Thanksgiving in his induction cooking kitchen. So just a really nice guy, and he's actually helping his fellow homeowners now rebuild. You can see his nice leaf there, and I actually don't think you can see the solar on the roof. Oh, you can see it. Okay. Oh, yeah, the really obvious solar. It's blending in here. So this is what the home looks like. Not really rocket science. Again, like these are all appliances that you would sort of expect to see in a standard new construction home. I'm gonna have a list at the end of all the products that they're using in case you're interested. But he is super happy with his home at the end of the day. He does have battery storage. He did come out 26% more energy efficient than a home in his Title 24. We've just now started tracking his utility bills because he just came online in about November, and really promising first results in terms of energy savings. He is sort of going, I think, the whole shebang. So this is definitely one side of electrification. And you can see here the products that he's using. Pretty straightforward.
Question.
Yeah.
Does it have a mixing valve so you can do thermal storage on that water heater?
It does. Yeah, so we are very much encouraging one of our sister programs to this. In fact, a program that we layer onto everything is our program that we call Grid Savvy. I talked a little bit briefly about why we're doing EV charging stations and giving those to people for free. We also see heat pump water heaters as big thermal batteries that we can basically preheat during 2 to 5 p.m. Things like Nest thermostats can be brought into there as well. So this is really the layer onto electrification that we need as a utility to make sure we're not causing more duct curve issues.
So you actually have control of all those appliances?
I do. Yeah. So how it works? Yeah, right. Yeah, I'll turn it off right now. No. How it works? Basically, what we do is we offer our customers what we think the market value is for participating in demand response programs. So we as a utility can really reduce our procurement costs if we don't have to pay for those 5 to 8 p.m. resources. So we say, at a scale of 5,000 water heaters, here's the value to us. As a nonprofit customer, you get all of that back in your monthly bill. So it works out to be about a $5 per month incentive for our customers, plus or minus. And each technology sort of has a different requirement and a different methodology in how we dispatch it. But in general, when offered the choice, 90% of our customers are signing up for demand response, which is a crazy high number to me. And so far, pretty excited. Like, we had one person who watched our first dispatch of the electric vehicle charging stations, and I was like, it's not gonna be exciting. Like, there's gonna be a light that turns off. And if it is exciting, then we did something wrong. But yeah, no, so our customers are really excited about this program. We're really excited about involving them in a solution because we honestly can't do this alone. We can't solve it with procurement. Our customers are sort of the solution here. I wanted to go back to our house that I just showed you and show you what this looks like for us as a utility, because this is where it can get potentially really either very scary or really cool, depending on what's going on with the home. So this is his home. This is the electricity use before he lost his home. This is a dual fuel home at this point, so he had natural gas here. And you can see this nice little flat curve that's very easy for us to procure. Not much variation in that. This is the first week what his home looked like. And if that doesn't look like a duck, then I don't know what does. Like, this is really a scary idea for utilities in that as we electrify homes, are we creating more mini duck curves that are gonna create one big massive duck? What was going on here is, yeah, a big ugly goose. So his battery hadn't been hooked up during this first week. And this is what it looked like a week later when he hooked it up. So actually really cool, really nice for us is that his battery is shifting that load to where he's becoming a user at his lowest cost time, which is also our peak solar time. So this is really how we want these all electric homes to operate. And things like our Grid Savvy program are sort of taking these technologies and shifting it. So it's really cool to see.
That was solely done by the battery, not you.
This was not me hacking into his house. So what I'm really excited to see is as I start hacking, how much I can even optimize this more, because the battery is huge. And this is why we're looking at things like residential
What's
storage.
the estimated lifespan of the battery?
He has a 15-year warranty on his.
Estimated
I will say he has a 15-year warranty on his battery. And I usually encourage people, there's some vendors that have 5-year warranties and some that have 15. I usually encourage folks to go to the 15-year warranty
These
codes.
are lithium-ion batteries that require no use or maintenance.
Correct. So he has a lithium ion. We have a couple people who are doing, we have a couple lead acid battery folks in our program. It's been really intriguing for us to watch that first week as the battery adjusts and see how different manufacturers are behaving. So as a data geek, this is really exciting to me. Probably no one else in the world besides maybe people in this room. But yeah, we just mandate a size to the battery. We don't specify a technology.
How big?
7.5 kilowatt hours. So we echo the Title 24 2019 requirement. Yeah.
This is not a very friendly chart for the customer. What looks to me like is he's charging his electric vehicle during the middle of the day. He should be charging at night. That spike should be.
He's a NEM customer, so this is actually his least costly time to use energy.
On what rate structure is midday the lowest rate?
He's a NEM customer, and that is actually his lowest. That's his lowest.
On what rate? There's no rate.
Net energy metering.
I know what that.
So if he was getting power to PG&E or Sonoma Clean Power, he could get maybe 3 to 5 kilowatts. So by charging his battery, he's basically doing arbitrage.
Yeah.
Because the rate is far higher.
That spike is draw, isn't it?
That's correct.
Correct. And that's the
Charging
cheapest time.
Well, those are rates. That's a rate. That's how much power is
Those are
drawn
hours
in
of
that
the day.
period.
So hours of the
Those are the hours
day,
of the day, yes. And he's
Spikes.
drawing a great big spike of power, 12 kilowatts, at noon. He's charging his car.
Kilowatt demand, not cost of the
This is kilowatt hour, not rate.
It's not
It
price.
doesn't matter, it's the same thing, because you're looking
it depends on your rate. And honestly, this is sort of what we're shifting towards. All utilities are shifting towards time of use rates with sort of the cheapest cost midday. So this is actually the cheapest time for him to actually do that. So generally, if you're over generating or using less during the day, that's the least cost effective situation for you. It depends too. The EV rate can be an interesting rate too if you're sort of able to shift everything to 11 p.m. So it just depends on what rate you're
at.
on.
He should be on an EV rate. I mean, if he's got an electric vehicle, he should be on an EV rate.
He was grandfathered into a good NEM rate. So it was more cost effective for him to do this.
Well, that's what.
Yeah, I'm still confused on the chart there.
Yeah.
That's a 24-hour clock on the bottom. The big nights are.
Correct.
Now, the first red line, that shows a surplus of power up until 1300 or so, and then a big spike at 4 o'clock in the afternoon with a big draw of power. Okay.
Correct.
You're not using any electricity until dinner time, and then you turn everything on.
Yeah, that's sort of
Okay, I
standard.
understand that one.
What are
Now, the next one that has that little pyramid and then the spike, what is that?
the gray? So it's him pulling from the grid basically at that earlier time. So that means his battery would have discharged at ideally sort of that where that peak was before. So
So that gray line is his battery?
no, so that's the anti-battery almost. So that's him being home. It could be him charging his EV. It could be him just using electricity. That's basically him home doing his thing.
So he's taking a big surge of between 12 and 1 and 2 in the afternoon?
Correct.
He's drawing.
He's charging his battery, right?
Yes, we need it.
Feels like
That's
it.
a valid
Yeah. So he could be doing a variety of
Those
things.
batteries, they can't charge that high. That's a 5 kilowatt inverter on that battery. It's not drawing 12 kilowatts. It's not charging the battery.
And it could be a combination of things. So honestly, behavior is the fun part of our job. So it's most likely a combination of things. It could be a
hang
direct.
out at home, you know?
Who is this guy?
Let's go see his home.
Always have some on your computer.
Oh yeah, right? No, so he does, he probably was at home this day. It's interesting, like you can definitely tell patterns from interval data for these customers. So it could be a variety of things. I mean, he has an all electric home. So this could be the worst case scenario of his AC turned on, he's doing laundry, he's charging his car. So it could be a number of factors.
I wanted to ask
The woman in the back had her hand up.
Question?
Yeah.
Have you guys looked at what happens if you try to put in V2G?
We currently really cannot. So,
But we need to do V2G to get where we need to go. So I'm wondering if you would consider.
and we have, so we're doing our sort of ramping up and down without interacting with the grid, which we think gives us probably about 90% of the current value. We are working with the CEC and the CPUC to sort of talk V2G and V2 home, which I think is also a really cool idea for how to transition this, especially when we get to sort of resiliency questions. So we are very gung-ho on both. This is just sort of what we can do right now with the chargers that we have without getting into breaking laws. So.
What time of year is this?
This was winter.
I wanted to just add, I have an electric car and I have PG&E's electric vehicle schedule. I charge it from 11 o'clock at night until 6 in the morning. That is a quarter of the kilowatt hour price than it is during the day.
It's 12 cents.
It's 12 cents instead of like 35.
45.
45,
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is a very common way to charge your cars.
And all new stuff will have to be like that. There's no way to change the slide.
Yeah.
So, the subject to this gentleman's question, is that going to change? Because if you look at the ISO
It is changing.
emissions curve, it is opposite
Yes.
of peak curve.
Yep, it is
So if
already
you're trying to reduce
transitioning.
emissions, you want to charge in the middle of the day with a large solar
Yep.
resource to dispatch.
So the rate making process is very slow. It lags by years. So what's really interesting to us as a CCA, because we can actually adjust our rates very nimbly, is there a solution where we can move a portion of the CCA rate and have an impact while sort of the PG&E portion of the rate stays static. So that's actually really interesting to me as sort of a thought experiment. I will say there is a new EV rate coming out that I believe just went to the PUC like a week ago that's looking at moving this window. So it is slowly adjusting, but rates are really, unfortunately, a hard way to get at this. I will say what's really encouraging is as we transition every customer to time of use rates in California, we're starting to see actually a pretty good load shift behavior as a result of that. So we're tracking about 5 to 10% load shift out of those 5 to 8 p.m. hours to sort of when we need it. So rates can be a solution, but I don't think they're the only solution, unfortunately. Yeah, Rachel.
Interesting what you were just saying, like how does it work for CCAs if so much of the rate is from the IOU?
That's the problem.
What control do you have?
Very little, honestly. So that's the crux of the issue is as a CCA, we're a very small portion of your bill, despite what some of our customers may think. So it's really hard to come up with creative ways to really do things through rates, which is actually why we use bill credits as sort of a proxy right now for adjusting where rates should be. But I think the answer is we can probably, as a CCA, do very little. But we're actually working with PG&E, specifically looking at that and saying how can we adjust our little piece to be more nimble while you guys go through your slow process. Yeah.
And what about the structure for charging when people are at work? Because, right, you drive your car to work.
Yep.
That's where you are.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question for us. So I will say PG&E has a phenomenal workplace multifamily program that we direct folks to. So we have felt the need to make a little investment in that now. Where we're probably going is incentivizing smaller workplaces. So PG&E EV Charge Network has a 10 charger minimum. So we're looking at our businesses that can't facilitate that. How do we serve those customers? Absolutely a great demand response resource. The sort of interesting counter to that is most people who own an EV want to charge at home if given the possibility. So there's like, how do you get at the decarbonization piece of the car easiest versus the demand response resource? And ideally, it's investments in both of those.
You could make the rates really attractive.
Yes.
During that.
Well, again, we can make our small portion of the rate attractive. Most of that, especially when you get into commercial, is on the PG&E side of the bill. So we can have very little impact on that. What we can do is sort of work with our customers to do like charging incentives that are charging costs that are variable throughout the day, or do things like ramp up and down charging and compensate customers fairly for that. So it's a really good question, and I think the answer, unfortunately, is you have to invest in both sides. So, yeah, Rachel.
Sorry, one more question. How does Sonoma Clean Power finance their electrification incentives? I know that the AQMD and PG&E is part of it, but just the Sonoma Clean Power.
Ours. So we collect from our customers, and we collect basically slightly more than we need to be revenue neutral. And then anything that we collect in excess is invested back into our community. So basically our programs that we run are how we invest back and become a nonprofit. So that's our EV program, that's things like this, a variety of things. And it allows us to, again, not be subject to the confines of the CPUC programs and be able to really work with, say, PG&E's existing programs and supplement what they can't do as well for our customers. Okay, really quickly, obviously we can't just offer incentives and throw those at our customers and hope they work. So we do a lot of trainings with our customers. Pete actually might be somewhere in this photo in the left, depending on when I took it. But we do a lot of educational classes in partnership with PG&E, teaching our customers, what is a heat pump, things like that. We also have this program that we thought of over lunch one day that has become sort of this runaway hit program, which is we'll lend our customers an induction cooktop, a little portable one for a 3-week period to test out. This has been really phenomenal for us as a resource as folks are rebuilding. And what we do is we send them a survey afterwards saying, based on this, how likely would you be to make the switch to induction? And it's really awesome to see. Like, people don't get what induction cooking is until they actually experience it. And this is a really great, easy program. It cost us less than $1,000 to set up. It's now being expanded through our service territory. SCE, SMUD are doing it, Palo Alto is doing it. A number of other CCAs are looking at this. And this is sort of the one thing we can do to get these things into our customers' hand to show them these things are actually pretty cool if you cook on them. And then lastly, we'll get into this a lot more in the future, but how do we tackle retrofits? We're actually building this storefront in downtown Santa Rosa where customers can directly test induction cooking. So we're gonna have cooking classes there. We're gonna have heat pumps that people can actually test out that are heating the building, heat pump water heaters, and offer discounts there and have them get connected directly with our with contractors that can install them. So building off the success of this program with the induction cooktop, where we're actually getting people to test out these things, we're really excited about to take this to the next level and tackle the oh-so-easy retrofit market. So stay tuned. This is now, our permit just got pushed back, so coming winter this year. So right next to Russian River Brewing, too, so you can drink a beer and buy a heat pump. And then this is just my contact information, but I'll send you guys the slides in case you guys want to get in touch about any crazy ideas we're doing or reach codes or anything like that. So thank you guys.
Great, we're right on timing and they stopped banging, thank God.
Banging.
And so we're, like I said, we've got this place till 8:30. We don't have to stay that long, but we can. And we got a lot of smart people, a lot of interesting ideas, and time to talk. So we can do that, and as long as you feel like you want to stay and talk. So wide open. And I guess I'll call on people just because.
I will throw this out there. I talked to the building engineer out there. He apologized, so an apology.
Yeah.
He said he's going to start banging again after 8:30.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't know we were going to be here, and they're paying people, so,
He did apologize. I just
Yeah, we're not paying much. So. Yeah, I appreciate it. It's just a little frustrating when you're sitting there. This is the retrofit market is right. Yes, sir. Go ahead. And everybody speak loud, about this loud, so we
Yeah, okay. So, again, City of Albany, half of people live in Albany are renters.
Yep.
So what are some of the incentivization programs, or how do you see this hurdle of you've got landlords who own a building, but then you got tenants who pay for the energy usage, and where is the incentive for the building owner, because it isn't there with the renter, you're already paying a ton of rent, and then to be told they have to pay for the retrofit. So then there becomes this equity thing of if landlords do it, they're going to pass on the cost.
So I would say 2 ways to tackle that, and I would echo what Rachel said about reaching out to AEA, the Association for Energy Affordability. I used to work there, so I'm a little biased as well. But 2 ways that they sort of look at this in multifamily. One, when you create incentive programs, make sure that some of that is going directly to the tenants. So if you have a measure that's only benefiting the landlord, require that they also do something that benefits the tenants. So that's a really easy thing as you sort of look at program designs and ways to push incentive dollars that can be really attractive. Two, just more and more financing options, I would say, are key in that market. And then getting the homeowners or the renters to be advocates to their landlord, to be able to ask for these things is huge. And then you could look at sort of mandates. The interesting thing about multifamily is there are a lot of health and safety issues there too. So that's one way you could go about it. Landlords are very concerned about things like mold, carbon monoxide. So they could be interested in energy efficiency just from that standpoint. When we were running multifamily programs, the most sought after measure was windows, from exactly the mold standpoint. So if you can engage with a landlord there, that's a really easy intervention to sort of tack on some dollars for other energy efficiency or fuel switching. But that's really the market that honestly needs it. And it just takes people who care, honestly, who are really willing to go into that market that honestly isn't super cost effective for program administrators to serve. It's really hard. So you really need local advocates that can get into talking with those landlords to make a case that this is something that they should do. But yeah, multiple solutions needed, unfortunately.
We looked at what the total cost would be, to retrofit as compared to the new construction?
It depends a lot on what your electrical situation is, so what your panel size is, whether you have the plug there. And I will say what we see a lot of, which we're trying to combat, is we see a lot of contractor gouging because they don't understand the technologies. So that's one thing I think we can really easily sort of bring in our manufacturers and say, here's how you install my product. It is not really scary to install a heat pump water heater. In fact, in some ways, it's probably easier. So that's pretty huge in that market, but I would say honestly really depends on that electrical upgrade situation, because that can spike your costs by $2,000 to $15,000 depending on what the extent of the electrical upgrades are needed in your home. The sort of nice trend I think we're seeing in the market is that manufacturers are really getting that we need retrofit friendly products. So this is something that a whole bunch of people at the statewide level have said, hey, we need a heat pump water heater that's lower amperage, for instance. So I think there's a trend towards lower amperage retrofit friendly products that will help. But right now, it is really hard to fully electrify some homes, and especially multifamily, getting at that question about multifamily. Yeah.
So a hurdle I'm kind of thinking of is when you first started looking at this and all, we were thinking, oh, we'll implement a kind of building energy efficiency requirement. And, when you sell your home, you got to bring it up to a certain. And of course, that didn't go over very well for the real estate community, even though they're making tons of money. A few extra bucks apparently on energy efficiency isn't wanted. So there's this idea that, well, maybe you just forego doing, because envelope upgrades can be really expensive, especially when you get into redoing all the windows and trying to insulate, stud walls and all that, especially in old lath and plaster buildings and all that. What about the approach where you just put a lot of solar on the house and then you go all electric, and maybe you're not very efficient, but since you're generating sustainable product, I mean, that's a better way. I mean, is that strategy something that's
It can be. I mean, my advice always is to do energy efficiency first, because it means a smaller investment in solar. So that is.
Get your envelope to a point where it would really make sense. You're spending $50,000-$60,000 replacing all the windows, doors, insulating the house.
Yeah, it depends on the home.
It's a huge hurdle on these funky little California homes built in the 20s with no insulation.
Yeah, it depends on the home, I would say. I don't think solar is a solution for everything. In some cases, solar can make things worse for us as a utility. So it can really cause huge price spikes in that 5 to 8 p.m. period. And honestly, what we're seeing in California is we're starting to curtail solar midday. So if we just throw solar on top of everything,
Well,
that's
you
not a
have the solar
solution.
battery.
Yeah.
All the solar should have storage with it.
Yes,
And that's all
solar with battery, solar plus electrification. I think we need to shift our mindset about solar just being the one-all solution to everything. It, I think, needs to start to be paired intelligently with other things.
Involved with energy storage last year, and pretty much everyone who had designed their system to be net neutral is actually doing much more than just net neutral in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. As most of them all have electric vehicles as well. An electric vehicle doubles your greenhouse gas savings. So in general, they're all doing phenomenally better in terms of their greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, I will say the really interesting thing about storage is that's one case where we really do need to get our rates aligned, because most battery storage will optimize based on rate, and if the rates are not aligned where your greenhouse gas emissions are, we can have really bad cases where batteries are actually causing increases in emissions. And you can see this sometimes, and it's a little scary, but that's sort of, I think, where we need to work more with the industry to...
That's all changed because the PG&E has changed the rates so that they're now, the peaks are all in the evening periods. So,
yeah, so it depends on the rate
that's
too.
That's forcing that change already.
Yeah.
That's already happened.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Well, I want to think back on that energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is even more important when you talk about heat pumps. I think heat pumps are great technology. There's a lot of positives, but it's not all, everything has a mixed up. Heat pumps have issues with especially with recovery rate. They take a long time to get up to speed, and you can have a lot of customer dissatisfaction. They expect you to have this gas furnace that can crank out tons of BTUs right away and get the house real hot. The heat pump can't do that. And so if you're leaking, your ducts, there's 30% leakage and all that stuff, it's going to be less customer satisfaction in a loose envelope. So you really need to pair a high degree of energy efficiency with the heat pump installation to get savings and good customer satisfaction.
So sealing the ducts is not enough?
Come again?
It's not just about sealing the ducts, it's actually about sealing the house. It's gonna be
Everything, yeah.
Yeah, an insulation
On
can
the
make
subject
it
of-
feel more comfortable.
Yeah, in the back.
On the subject of heat pumps, we're in a temperate climate here. Probably work pretty well, but further north, shorter days, below freezing temperatures a lot of the time. What is the solution in areas like that?
So that's a great question. I would say this has really changed dramatically, like in the past 5 years. They now have what are called cold climate heat pumps, which are basically just optimized for those lower temperatures. And they will generally have electric resistance backup, but that's operating a lot less than it did even 5 years ago. So that's generally your solution, is a cold climate heat pump. If you really need to supplement with some sort of electric heat. At the worst, maybe if you're allowed an area where you can do natural gas, some small furnace. But the problem with using gas backup is gas systems are really designed to heat a whole home. They don't make small gas systems. So it doesn't make a really good backup heat source. So I generally prefer a really efficient cold climate heat pump with some sort of electric resistance backup that's gonna hopefully trigger a lot less than it did even 5 years ago.
Yeah, that's something that at Village Green we designed a high performance HVAC installation measure, and we can't find gas furnaces small enough.
Yeah.
They'll shut if the envelope is tight and the system's efficient. The furnace will run for 5 or 10 minutes, and then it'll be off for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And the problem is that in that first interim, when it fires up, it's terribly inefficient,
no matter what the manufacturer wrote on the label. So,
Or you have short cycling, which is maybe even worse, where it goes like 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. And every time it does that, it has to purge the exhaust gases from it. So that is like your worst case scenario. And that's what you end up when you have sort of gas backup. So that you can think of something like using HRVs as well if the climate warrants it. And I will say here, HRVs, I will say Title 24 says they're wonderful in action.
Can you define that acronym? Yeah.
Heat recovery ventilators, thank you. Which what those are is instead of dumping all the heat out of your home, they're basically a fancy exhaust system that harvests a portion of the heat and dumps it into an incoming airstream. So that's becoming a really cool technology in these cold climates to not just waste all the heat out your bathroom exhaust fan. So that pairs really, really well with, say, like a heat pump, which doesn't have a dedicated incoming air source to provide fresh ventilation and a boost in energy efficiency. So that's another option, too, for really cold climates. Yeah?
Do you know if the juice box is the only charging system that you can actually control externally?
Nope. Yeah, it generally depends on the software. So we use a company called eMotorworks, which does make the hardware for the juice box, but they also make the software that's compatible with multiple chargers. Generally, most charging companies, at least the sophisticated ones now, have the ability to sort of send remote signals to their products because more and more utilities are asking for it.
Back to the battery backup kind of thing in the duct turbine, I understand.
You're gonna make me go back to that chart, huh?
Well, no, but one thing that kind of bothers me about this conversation is that it seems like at this point in time, it's left to the individual homeowner to invest in a battery, like you say you install solar with batteries. So that's the individual solar system with the battery backup. Are the utilities moving towards having batteries inside the utility so that when the solar producer is pushing back to the grid, when they're producing a lot, the utility stores it, and then that's what's supplied in that demand time?
Yes.
And why is it on the consumer side and not on the utility side?
I think it's a combination of both, realistically. So every utility is again mandated to do some battery storage now. It's a pretty small portion of our overall load. Most utilities basically stop there. And why that is because battery storage pricing is tanking currently. So it's going to really decrease in the next several years, so that making an investment like 3 years down the line is probably much more cost effective for a utility. And I think the technology will be a little better. So
it's moving that way?
I think we are moving that way. And every utility is going to basically run into what we're running into, which is that last little bit that you can't solve with procurement options, right, where it needs to be storage or demand response or some combination of the above. I think still the answer is always both, because every time a customer invests in any sort of distributed resource, that means the utility has to invest in less, and that then when we invest in that, that gets passed to all our customers in terms of what they pay on their bill. So any less investment that we can make is better ultimately for our customers. So it's sort of like an interesting waiting game of when is the best cost-effective time for us to invest in solar for our customers. Unless the state mandates more storage, which is a real possibility since they've already sort of mandated we have to get to basically zero emissions eventually. I don't know that a lot of utilities are going to invest in much more than what they need to now. With the exception being that there are some cases, and this gets really interesting. So PG&E just had a great project that they sponsored with EBCE, where they can pull off a gas plant and put in basically solar plus battery. So I think there's still really a case to be made for pulling off gas plants and putting in utility storage plus solar resources.
Are batteries the only storage system that's proving to be cost effective long term in the future versus dynamo systems and water pumping systems? Is it because of the batteries going down in price and they're simpler and scalable?
I would say they are probably the most applicable in all situations across the board. Something like pumps hydro is a great resource, but it was really site specific.
Yeah.
And so you get into this, like, how applicable is it versus how costly is it question. But I would say we need multiple options. And things like heat pump water heaters can be a great option as well when you're talking sort of local resources. So that's a great way to sort of shift load for us.
So can I speak to that question for a minute? You should look at flywheel technology.
That's dynamo, yeah.
Okay, yeah, we have the Oakland City block under a CEC grant. We're going to go to zero carbon for an entire city block of Oakland, and that was the one that worked best for us. And
Are they way more efficient than a battery, or is this?
yeah, the efficiency is pretty great. It's
Okay.
like between 92 and 96. It's pretty great.
Wow.
Yeah, and lithium is going to be a real limiting factor for our current battery technology.
Because of resources?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are some interesting experiments going on with sulfur instead of lithium, which is a waste product of fossil fuel, which is a little funny, but that may be kind of like using coal fly ash. But
Yeah, so that's the other big question is the battery storage market going to shift to some new technology in the next few years? So you don't want to overinvest now and basically have all of that be sunk costs if there's a better option. So I'd say right now, cautious investment by all the utilities. We know we need to store energy. We know we can't do this with just adding more solar on the grid. So everyone needs to get there. It's just a question of how fast, I would say, and how costly.
So the other technology that hasn't gotten big but could is the flow battery. Because the flow battery can give you 6 to 8 hours at a time for 30 years. So the investment may be a little higher at the beginning, but in the end, you'll get it back. And I think that's, people are looking at like, when is that going to happen?
What's the flow
What's a
battery?
flow battery?
The flow battery is a liquid electrolyte battery that in general uses vanadium. And they've always been like giant things about the size of a house, but now they're making them small enough to use for residential. And the prices are starting to come down. They're being made in Europe right now. So
We
there
actually do
is
have
some
a homeowner that did a
opportunity.
flow battery too.
Yeah, to start looking at flow batteries. And I'm thinking for like in your situation with the resiliency issue, when people need to have their oxygen on all night, a 2-hour battery isn't going to cut it. You need the 6 hours, you need the 8 hours, and it may be worth it if you can supply, some kind of incentive so that people don't have to go and live into a nursing home or a hospital or, just not make it. It is, I think, sort of on the horizon for flow battery.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting question about resiliency because, as we start to think about distributed energy resources, we don't have a really cost-effective way right now to ride through the eventual length of a public safety shutoff event and how long that could be. So for these people who are sort of our more vulnerable populations, that is really, I think, weighing heavily on everyone involved on how do we solve this problem.
You're going to need to adjust your incentive for the need because a 2-hour or 4-hour battery just doesn't do this right.
Yep. Yeah, no, we're on the same page.
So if I'm talking to my friends and neighbors about a retrofit idea, so homeowner, 1,500 square foot, typical California house, I know it depends, but what's the sort of headline story that I could tell them about retrofitting to all electric, electrifying your house? Are you going to expect to pay $10,000, $20,000 in order to do this? Is it going to pay off over some period of time, or is it immediately cost effective? What's the sort of the headline level?
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, the unfortunate answer is it depends on the home. But I would say that's a good sort of ballpark, assuming maybe not investing upfront costs for solar or battery, just looking at sort of electrification, assuming some upgrade. What I would say is there are great programs that PG&E runs and Bayron run that offer free home audits, and they can help advise on potential solutions there and costs. even though they can't unfortunately fund it now. Hopefully that's something that your local CCA can step in and help out with as well. But they're a great resource for at least providing first estimates of what that could cost. But yeah, a lot of the costing resources right now have sort of focused on the new construction market because it's a little easier to know. But I would say if you take any of those new construction studies, they'll give you really good estimates of equipment costs, and that shouldn't change dramatically between retrofit and new construction scenarios. It's more like the labor costs. So you can sort of look at that and get a first estimate of at least a portion of the costs. And the one I generally use is the statewide codes and standards, one that's published by the investor-owned utilities. It's a really good one that breaks it all out.
We need to figure out how to fish wires through gas pipes.
Right? Yeah, we thought of all sorts of crazy ideas for what would go through gas pipes.
Beer. It's gonna do it. It's Con 8 now.
Have you guys thought about it all, the trade-offs between either heat pump water heater versus solar thermal with electric backup? So,
so the unfortunate thing about heat pump water heaters is they don't love incoming hot water.
exactly, right. So it would be electric resistance if you were pairing it with...
The PV and heat pump water heater combination is infinitely more cost effective. What's really interesting is we saw that shift first in the multifamily market, which was really gung-ho on solar thermal, and has made this like really cool transition to central heat pumps for water heating plus solar, because that's just more cost effective.
Plus solar PV.
Solar PV, plus solar PV. We have some customers that are really into solar thermal. I will say for the average customer, not having to upkeep the system or have things like pumps or water going through your home as much makes the PV a more attractive option for most customers. We do see it every once in a while. I generally say PV is the better investment if you're electrifying your hot water.
Rachel, I compete.
Yeah.
I've been following and teaching solar thermal classes for years, and it's a really difficult industry. It's kind of dying out, particularly on the home side. And the problem is that even though the technology is getting better, but incrementally so. It's not the big jump between the $10,000 system that saves you $20 a month, which was the economic problem. And it's very difficult to find somebody to do it on the home scale or to maintain it. So it's getting underneath that critical mass so that there's not that many people out there who could put these things in or who want to put these things in. The multifamily market was still going strong, but even that, I think, is weakening a bit with the inclusion of heat pumps. So it's just a challenge. Solar thermal for the homes is a real challenge.
And do you think it's a challenge, like, so, you know, there's this volume problem, right? And is it because it's, like, are there real technical, like, challenges with that make the volume low? Or is it that it's not like the new great technology, like it's not as alluring to the homeowner as...
It's just not as cost effective. Basically, people spend about $20 a month for a gas water heater to heat their water. That's $220 a year. And if you get a system that costs you about $2,000 to get your payback, if they cost you $8,000, now we've got, even with a big rebate program where the money is largely unused, it knocks it down to about $4,000, but that still puts it out with a lot of maintenance and variability and stuff going on that this seems to be just so simple. Just slap on the PV and get the heat pump and don't worry about the pumps and the glycol and all that sort of thing. So it's just,
It's not kids.
you know, a lot of people try to do it. It's just that it's playing out that way. Yeah.
So you think you said like around 35% of folks are electrifying and the rest are doing mixed fuel? Can you talk a little bit about like why it's not a higher percent and what's causing people not to electrify?
Fireplaces are actually number one. We thought it would be cooktops, which is why we sort of created the cooktop program. The electric fireplaces are not wonderful. They're, you know, I'm an electrification nerd and these things are not great. There's like maybe one or two models that I think homeowners like, but even then it's a real transition for folks. Unfortunately, a lot of these folks had wood-burning fireplaces before and can no longer build with wood-burning fireplaces because of restrictions from the air district. So they want that fireplace back, and they're not willing to go the electric version.
Are they doing heat pumps or anything else, or just the gas
Yeah,
fireplace?
so we have a lot of customers that are fully electrified with that gas hookup for their fireplace, which drives me crazy. Yeah, right? Yeah.
Interested wood burning inserts?
So you can't do a wood burning fireplace in our service territory.
But like a wood stove? Like an insert that would be like a wood stove that would sit like inside, you know what I mean?
Like a
an
wood
insert.
burning,
Wood burning, yeah.
oh, you can't do it.
You can't do wood burning.
Can't do it.
at all.
Nope.
What about a propane?
You can do propane.
No.
So,
Crazy to pay for the hookup just
Yep.
for that.
yeah, which is insane. But people love their fireplaces. So, and what I think is really interesting, I'm really interested to see sort of like what the emissions are for their like 1 day of fireplace use for some of these customers. Like that's actually a really scary problem to me, and I love to see more development on better looking electric fireplaces. It's pretty unfortunate. And then obviously number 2 is cooking. As much as we, share induction with folks, there are just people that it is a non-starter. Not willing to do it, not willing to try. A lot of these folks are like, I'm a cook, not interested. I think we have great resources to combat like 90% of people who are coming at it saying, I don't want to do it. But there is a good portion of people that just will not electrify their cooking unless it's mandated that they do so. And yeah, those are the big 2, I'd say. HVAC, so heating and cooling, that has really already started to electrify in our service territory before this program. So most of our contractors and most of our homeowners are familiar with heat pumps. That's more convincing them that there's versions that aren't ductless mini splits that are out there, because a lot of people associate the ugly head unit that they see in hotels with heat pumps. So that's more education of there's ducted systems that you won't see that operate just like sort of a traditional furnace would. So that's pretty huge there. And then water heaters people don't care about, unfortunately, as much as I care about them. Our customers don't. And then laundry's pretty easy sell as well. So.
Are you seeing good adoption in the heat pump dryers?
No, they're not
These are
great.
electric.
Yeah, they're using standard electric resistance. I'd say heat pump dryers are slow. That's the big issue with them. They're efficient, but most people aren't willing to wait that long. Yeah, it can be 3 or 4 hours for some of these models to dry, and that's a big time to wait for some people. So we see, it's usually such a small portion of their overall load that I say just do the electric dryer. Usually, when I'm talking with folks, I say there's a heat pump version. Unless you're really an energy geek, just go with the electric resistance for now.
Just don't run it at 7 o'clock at night, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The only advantage of the heat pump is if you had a location for a dryer, it would be very difficult to get the exhaust out. Just a mile of pipe and with retrofit where you got to fishing through a building or something. That's the only advantage that a heat pump water dryer gives, is you don't have that duct in the road.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly some cases where it could make sense, but I generally, if it were my home, I don't know that I would want one, and I'm really on the geeky side of things, so I think most homeowners aren't making that investment quite yet. But that's fine, yeah.
So the preferences seem like they match up pretty well with the consumption graph that you showed, because water heating and house heating are like 75% of the energy use, right, for a house?
Yeah.
Approximately. I mean, so if those are the 2 easiest things to convert, that's pretty good news, right?
That is good news. I think that is the sort of counterpoint to the really depressing fact that they have all those stranded fireplaces out there.
Fireplaces once a week. Okay, fine.
Yeah, so we're making lots of progress. I would say we're seeing huge trends. We're seeing like our heat pump water heater vendors for the first time stock product locally, which is a really cool trend to see. Previously, they would have to go to like Oakland to pick those up. from places that actually stocked them. So there's a lot of really cool progress. Before this, only 10% of our homes used electric heating or water heating. So seeing this big jump is promising. I think if we want to get to California's goals, it's not enough, unfortunately. So we need to start looking at things like reach codes or mandates to start electrifying industries or make a lot more progress in that market. Did you have a question back there? Oh, no.
Well,
You're...
I did, but it's someone else.
Oh.
Well, I had a quick question. Heat pump versus heating with gas in your house. Does the heat pump rely more on the home efficiency, like the really good windows, the sealed ducts and everything, than the traditional? Do you follow what I'm asking? Is it more important to have, obviously it's good to have that efficiency across the board, you're gonna save money either way, but
yeah,
is it more reliant with
it's
the
an
heat pump?
interesting question. So I'd say where heat pumps are really, where they shine, and this maybe isn't answering your question technically, but so as our homes get more efficient and tighter, furnaces are oversized. So heat pumps come in smaller sizes and more varied sizes. So you can do a lot more tuning to the actual load of your home. But the load of your home is sort of the load of your home. That's sort of based on how you build the walls, the roof. And you can heat that any variety of ways. Heat pumps are more energy efficient, so about 3 to 4 times more energy efficient. But you have to counter that with the fact that electricity for now is slightly more expensive. So you need that extra efficiency to make it cost comparable. I said a lot of words.
Longer?
I don't know if I answered your question.
I think
Depends.
I probably need to research heat pump.
Yeah.
But does
So
it
it
take
depends on
much
the-
longer for the heat pump to
Yeah,
get the same?
that's the point I made about recovery rate.
Right.
It takes them longer to heat the house. So if your house is inefficient and you have to keep heating it, the gas furnace can get you up to a good temperature much quicker. You'll feel that house will be cold and uncomfortably cold, more so with a heat pump because it doesn't heat as fast.
So it favors the more efficient house?
Yes, you want to get a really tight
Less than
envelope
the
with a
gas.
heat pump.
So the heat pump puts out how many BTUs?
Depends.
Well, I mean,
They-
Sometimes it's high.
from 8,000 to 60,000.
Okay, so a gas
anything.
furnace puts out 50 to 100,000.
Yeah. And
And
it
you
depends
can-
on the
It's
you can
temperature outside.
combine these
delivery
things.
temperature
Yeah,
is lower.
Yeah.
That answers my question, for
Yeah.
sure.
That's more
Right there.
comfortable overall, because it's a steady flow of warm air instead of these hot blasts.
Right.
The way I describe it is gas is usually like a jet engine, so like instant and like huge BTU draws
Air
versus
dryer.
the heat pump is like the slow simmer. So yeah, and that I think when you get to something like the water heating is really cool because then you get like storage low input versus like the tankless water heater, which is like all power, no storage. So like direct opposites. So that's sort of an interesting way to talk about it too. Yeah.
Let's make this the last question, and we got to shut down. I want to talk to people just briefly before we break up. So one more.
Yeah, okay. So I had a question as a utility, and this goes on to other things. Since I've adapted to more electrical use and I have a solar system with batteries, and I've got 2 electric cars now with batteries. A lot of people I talk to, they're very worried about, well, the battery's just going to die in X years. And you hear about the warranty, like you had mentioned, the warranty. Same thing with solar panels, 25 years. They think they all die, like they literally crumble to dust. And then you'll have to totally replace them all over again. But it does bring up an interesting question. We've had like this huge adaptation of especially PV and batteries and all that. Is there going to be, as a utility, are you looking at, well, we need to replace these out, or there's a refresh at some point, or are we really thinking these systems will run for 50, 60 years?
Yeah, a lot of, especially PV systems, there could be some degradation, but some actually, like we have some that survived the fires. So some of these things are resilient. It just honestly depends, I would say. But generally, same thing with solar thermal. You see like 70-year-old solar thermal systems that are up there running. So you'll definitely see some degradation over time. But I'd say you run into these systems in the wild that have been operational for years and years and years. So usually...
You guys are planning on completely changing all your PV systems in 25 years because they've gone down.
I mean, ideally, energy efficiency will also sort of nicely dovetail with any degradation too. And then the question is, should we build more PV if our pain point hours are 5 to 8 p.m. as a utility? So ideally, probably the utility answer is no, especially as solar PV becomes mandatory for all new construction. I think the answer is going to become increasingly as a smart utility. Investments in solar are not when we need energy for California. So it turns into like, how do we become a utility that is weirdly only procuring energy maybe from like 5 to 8 p.m. in the early morning? And maybe everything else is, yeah, yep.
But I mean, if you're gonna go to zero carbon, you're gonna have a lot more solar.
Maybe.
Well, no, you do, because of how much is being generated.
Because of electrification and transportation, right?
Right, because, yeah, well, all of this. So, I mean, I agree it's pumping it in.
No, but I think that will be a really interesting trend to see. Maybe it's more wind in California, because that's a great resource that can provide at night, which is when we need it. So, yeah.
Okay, we got a little broad on the discussion, which is great. Thank you both, Rachel's. Thank you. You know all about North Solar by becoming a member. We also talked about, just on your point, sir, people are starting about recycling PV solar panels. And so we have a special deal for NorCal Solar members. We're working with Solar Cowboys about solar module recycling, and this is a big issue. So if you want to get involved with that and somebody who's really leading the charge, you can do that on our website and become members, and we'll ping us, and we'll let you know how to deal with that sort of recycling program here. Now, before we go, there's 3 little receptacles over there for your stuff. These things, unfortunately, are not